The price of ignorance. Ambassador Varix stood before the Stellar Council's crystalline chamber, his iridescent scales dulled with exhaustion. The message he carried would shatter 8 centuries of Stellarian superiority, though none of the assembled council members yet knew it. Above them, the artificial stars of the Centaurus array cast their cold light across the assembled dignitaries, each representing a different sector of their vast empire. Honorable Council, Varix began, his secondary respiratory system struggling to maintain composure, I bring grave news from the human territories. He noticed several council members shift dismissively in their hover seats. Humans were considered barely worth monitoring, a species that had only recently achieved basic interstellar travel. How wrong they had been. Supreme Chancellor Naira leaned forward, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with mild interest. What could the humans possibly have done to warrant an emergency session, Ambassador? Varix activated the holographic display, and the chamber darkened. This footage was captured at Installation 7, one of our youth enhancement centers. The image showed a massive complex built into the side of a mountain on a distant world. 3 days ago, this facility housed 50,000 human children. Yes, interrupted Counselor Drell, his tendrils waving impatiently. Part of our ongoing civilization program. The humans should be grateful we're elevating their offspring beyond their primitive. They're gone, Varix cut in, his voice sharp enough to silence the chamber. All of them. Along with the children from every other facility. 800,000 in total. The footage continued playing, showing the facility's supposedly impenetrable defenses simply failing. No alarms, no warnings, no signs of attack. Then figures appeared inside the compound, moving with impossible speed and precision. The Stellarian guards, equipped with the Empire's finest combat enhancements, didn't even have time to raise their weapons before collapsing unconscious. Impossible, whispered Defense Minister Koth, his scales turning pale. Our neural dampeners alone should have. Watch, Varix commanded softly. The black-clad figures moved through the facility with terrifying efficiency, but they weren't killing anyone. They were evacuating the children, thousands disappearing in moments through means that defied Stellarian sensing technology. Then came the message. A single human appeared in the center of the compound. She wore no obvious technology, no visible weapons, yet her presence commanded attention. I am Director Winter of the Human Liberation Force, she announced in perfect stellar speak. You took our children. You thought you could mold them, shape them, turn them into weapons against their own kind. You called it enhancement. We call it what it is, attempted genocide. The council chamber had gone deathly quiet. Winter's eyes seemed to pierce through the recording, through time and space, into the soul of every being present. We let you believe what you wanted about us, she continued. We watched as you built your empire, as you elevated species, as you spread your influence. We watched, we learned, and we hoped you would prove us wrong. But then you took our children. The image shifted, showing vast human fleets appearing from nowhere, using technology that made Stellarian achievements look primitive by comparison. Cities that defied physics, ships that bent reality, weapons that could unravel the fabric of spacetime itself. You have 24 hours, Winter stated. Return to your original homeworld. Abandon your colonies. End your empire. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is mercy, more than you showed our children. The recording ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. Varix looked at his fellow Stellarians, seeing the same horrified realization dawn across their faces that had haunted him since first viewing the footage. How? Supreme Chancellor Naira finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. How did we not know? How did we miss this level of advancement? Because we saw what we wanted to see, Varix replied. We saw their chemical rockets and assumed they were primitive. We saw their divided nations and assumed they were weak. We never considered that they might be letting us see exactly what they wanted us to see. Defense Minister Koth's tactical display sprung to life, showing new contacts appearing across Stellarian space. Multiple signals, thousands of them. They're everywhere. No, Varix corrected quietly. They always were. We just couldn't see them until they wanted us to. The price of their arrogance was about to come due, and Varix feared the cost would be everything they had built. They had thought themselves gods among lesser beings, only to discover they had been children playing at Empire while real power watched and waited. Now that power had tired of waiting. Silent thunder. Deep within the human command vessel Hyperion, Director Winter stood before a holographic display that showed 800,000 points of light, each representing a rescued child. The massive rescue operation, decades in planning, had been executed with precision that would have seemed impossible to their Stellarian observers, had any of them been capable of detecting the ship at all. "Status report," she commanded softly, her silver hair reflecting the glow of the tactical displays. Commander Reese stepped forward, his dark skin contrasting with the stark white of his uniform. "Operation Sanctuary is complete, Director. All children have been successfully extracted and are receiving medical attention. No casualties on either side." Winter nodded, allowing herself a moment of relief. The decision to avoid Stellarian casualties had been controversial among her advisors, but she had insisted. They would not become the monsters they fought against. "Neural imprint analysis," she asked, turning to Dr. Rivera, the chief medical officer who had been overseeing the children's recovery. "The Stellarian conditioning was extensive," Rivera replied, her hands clenched at her sides. "But reversible. They tried to rewrite their basic neural pathways, to make them loyal to the Empire, but they didn't understand human neuroplasticity. Our minds aren't as rigid as theirs." The irony wasn't lost on Winter. The very adaptability the Stellarians had hoped to exploit had become their undoing. Their attempts to reprogram human children had instead provided insight into their own technological capabilities, weaknesses, and most importantly, their thought patterns. A soft chime indicated a new presence in the command center. Admiral Fletcher materialized beside them, his holographic form indistinguishable from physical reality. He commanded the human fleet from a location 50 light-years away, yet spoke as if he were in the room. "The Stellarians are mobilizing their forces," he reported, gesturing to create a new tactical display. "Just as predicted, they're falling back to defensive positions around their core worlds." Winter studied the movement of enemy forces. "They still don't understand. They think this is a prelude to invasion. Should we enlighten them?" Fletcher asked, a hint of dark humor in his voice. "Not yet. Let them complete their defensive preparations. It will make the demonstration more effective." Winter turned to face her senior staff. The Stellarians built their empire on the belief that they had the right to elevate other species. That their technological superiority gave them the moral authority to reshape other civilizations in their image. She waved her hand, and the tactical display shifted to show the Stellarian capital world, Luminera. They've had 8 centuries to reconsider this position. Instead, they escalated. Taking our children was not just an act of aggression, it was a fundamental demonstration of their inability to recognize other species as equals. Dr. Rivera's holographic form appeared, transmitted from the medical bay where she continued to work with the rescued children. "Director, we're detecting increased neural activity in the quantum communication network. The Stellarians are trying to access our systems." Winter allowed herself a small smile. "Let them in. Selectively. Show them exactly what we want them to see." Throughout Stellarian space, their most advanced AI systems began encountering human technology for the first time, or rather, were being allowed to detect it for the first time. The effect was immediate and devastating. Their quantum computers, the pride of their civilization, appeared primitive compared to human systems that operated on principles their scientists had yet to discover. "They're attempting to analyze our ship designs," Commander Reese reported, monitoring the Stellarian probe attempts. "Shall we show them the truth about their supposed technological superiority?" Winter nodded. "Implement protocol revelation. Let them see exactly what they're facing." Across Stellarian space, their sensors began registering human vessels that had been there all along, hidden not by cloaking devices or stealth technology, but by operating on principles that Stellarian science couldn't even detect. Ships that didn't so much fly through space as negotiate with it. Weapons that didn't destroy targets but rather convinced localized regions of spacetime to politely excuse themselves from existence. "Signal from the Stellarian High Council," announced Commander Reese. "They're requesting immediate diplomatic contact." "Of course they are," Winter replied, her voice carrying centuries of accumulated patience. "Now that they can see a fraction of our capabilities, they want to negotiate. Ignore it. Let them experience uncertainty for a while longer. Let them feel what it's like to be powerless in the face of superior technology." The command center fell silent as they watched the Stellarian forces continue their futile defensive preparations. They were arranging their fleets in traditional battle formations, preparing for a type of warfare that had become obsolete centuries ago. "Director," Admiral Fletcher broke the silence, "the quantum fold generators are in position. We can begin the demonstration at your command." Winter studied the tactical display one final time, her expression resolute. The Stellarians believe themselves to be the shapers of younger races, the guardians of civilization. Today they learn that they have been playing in the shallow end of the cosmic pool. Begin the demonstration. Throughout human space, thousands of quantum fold generators activated simultaneously, each operating in perfect harmony. They weren't weapons in the traditional sense, they were tools of change, of restructuring reality itself. The universe held its breath, waiting for Winter's final command. The time for watching was over. The time for action had begun. Shattered certainty. Supreme Chancellor Naira watched in horror as the impossible unfolded before her eyes. The pride of the Stellarian Empire, their most advanced research facility in the Nexus sector, simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no dramatic display of force. The entire complex, along with the surrounding space, folded in on itself like a piece of paper being smoothed out of existence. "Analysis," she demanded, her bioluminescent patterns flashing chaotic patterns of distress. Defense Minister Koth's scales had taken on an ashen hue. There's nothing to analyze, Supreme Chancellor. The facility isn't destroyed, it's gone. As if it never existed in the first place. Our sensors can't even detect a void where it was. The space itself has been restructured. The emergency session of the High Council had been running for hours, ever since the humans had begun their demonstration. Across the chamber, the finest minds of the Stellarian Empire grappled with the death of everything they had believed about their place in the universe. "Show them again," Naira commanded. "Show them what we found in their networks." The central hologram shifted, displaying data they had gathered during their desperate attempt to understand their opponent. Human ships appeared, but they weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were more like agreements with reality, physical laws given form and purpose. Their weapons weren't weapons at all, they were localized modifications of spacetime itself. Ambassador Varix stepped forward, his voice heavy with realization. "We thought we were studying them. All these centuries, we thought we were the advanced civilization observing a primitive species. We were wrong. They were studying us. Impossible." Counselor Drell's tendrils writhed in agitation. "They were using chemical rockets when we first found them. Their planets were divided, their technology primitive." "Because that's what they wanted us to see," Koth replied quietly. "Every time we detected them using a new technology, every time we thought we had found one of their secrets, they were allowing it. Testing us. Watching how we would react." A new alert sounded throughout the chamber. On the tactical display, human vessels began appearing in perfect geometric formations around key Stellarian worlds. They weren't attack formations, they were something else entirely. "Message from the human command vessel," announced a junior controller, her scales pale with fear. Director Winter's image appeared before the council, her presence somehow more terrifying in its calmness than any display of anger could have been. "The demonstration is complete. Your research facility has been removed from space-time, not destroyed, removed. It never existed, and now it never will. The choice before you remains the same: return to your homeworld, abandon your empire, or face the consequences of your actions. You can't expect us to simply surrender everything we've built." Drell shouted, his diplomatic training forgotten in panic. "We are the Stellarian Empire. We have ruled the stars for 8 centuries. Winter's expression didn't change, but her voice carried an edge that made every Stellarian in the chamber flinch. "You haven't ruled anything. You've been playing at Empire while we watched and waited, hoping you would grow beyond your delusions of superiority. Instead, you took our children." The tactical display updated, showing more human ships appearing. Their formations were shifting, creating patterns that Stellarian military analysts couldn't begin to comprehend. "Those facilities," Winter continued, "the ones where you held our children, do you know what we found in them? Not just attempted indoctrination, not just neural conditioning. We found research notes. Plans to turn them into weapons against their own species. You didn't just kidnap our children, you were trying to remake them in your image." Naira stepped forward, desperation finally overcoming pride. "We thought we were helping them. Elevating them to a higher state of being." "No." Winter's voice was final, absolute. "You thought you were superior, and that gave you the right to reshape other species as you saw fit. Look around you, Supreme Chancellor. Look at your mighty empire, your advanced technology, your superior civilization. All of it existed because we allowed it to exist. And now that allowance is ended." The human ships were moving again, their formations becoming more complex, more beautiful, and more terrifying in their perfect geometry. "We are not attacking you," Winter explained, her tone almost gentle. "We are not destroying you. We are simply removing your ability to harm others. Your choice is simple: retreat to your homeworld and live in peace, or persist in your empire and cease to exist. You have 6 hours to decide." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Around them, the greatest achievements of Stellarian civilization suddenly seemed hollow, like children's toys pretending to be real technology. "How?" Naira whispered, though she already knew the answer. "How did we not see this coming?" "Because we saw what we expected to see," Varix replied. "We expected to find primitives, so we saw primitives. We expected to find inferior beings in need of our guidance, so that's what we convinced ourselves we found. We never considered that we might be the primitives, playing with forces we barely understood while real power watched and waited." The council chamber fell silent as the truth finally sank in. They hadn't been building an empire. They had been playing in a sandbox, supervised by beings so far beyond them that they couldn't even detect their presence until allowed to do so. And now playtime was over. The ultimatum. The quantum fold generators hummed in perfect harmony across 1,000 light-years of space, each one a note in a symphony of power that the Stellarians were only now beginning to comprehend. Aboard the Hyperion, Director Winter watched the final preparations with the patience of someone who had spent decades planning for this moment. "All systems are synchronized," Commander Reese reported, his hands moving through the holographic controls with practiced precision. "The containment field is ready for activation. We can begin the reclamation at your command." Winter nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the Stellarian Empire in its entirety. Their ships were scattered, their formations broken as each commander struggled to decide between following orders and fleeing to the homeworld. The once mighty empire was coming apart not with a bang, but with a whimper of indecision. "Status of the evacuation?" she asked. Admiral Fletcher's hologram materialized beside her. "Approximately 30% of Stellarian colonial forces have begun withdrawing to the homeworld. The rest remain in position, either awaiting orders or refusing to believe the situation. Show me the capital." The display shifted, focusing on Luminara, the Stellarian throne world. The crystalline spires of their greatest city sparkled beneath its 3 suns, a testament to what they could have achieved had they chosen a different path. In the High Council chamber, Supreme Chancellor Naira faced the greatest crisis in Stellarian history. The evidence of human superiority was overwhelming, yet centuries of ingrained belief in their own supremacy made acceptance nearly impossible. "We cannot simply surrender," Councillor Drell was saying, his tendrils writhing in agitation. "We are the Stellarian Empire. We have guided countless species toward enlightenment." "Guided them?" Ambassador Verix's laugh was bitter. "We conquered them. We remade them in our image. We told ourselves we were helping them advance, but we were really just making them more like us. And now we face a species that doesn't need our guidance, one that has been beyond us all along." A new alert sounded throughout the chamber. On the main display, the human ships were moving again, their formations shifting into new patterns that defied traditional spacetime geometry. "Message from the human command vessel," announced a junior controller. Director Winter's image appeared, but this time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a young Stellarian, one whose scales bore the distinctive markings of the imperial bloodline. Naira gasped in recognition. "Greetings, Supreme Chancellor," the young Stellarian said, his voice steady. "I am Coordinator Vex, formerly designated Subject 247 in your enhancement program. I speak now as a representative of those you sought to remake." Naira's bioluminescent patterns flickered in shock. "Prince Vex? But, you were lost in the Outer Rim accident 3 cycles ago." "There was no accident," Vex replied. "I discovered what was being done to the human children in our facilities. When I tried to report it, I was designated for special enhancement. The humans didn't just rescue their own children, Supreme Chancellor. They rescued everyone in those facilities, including those of your own people who had begun to question the Empire's methods." Winter stepped forward. "Your time is nearly up, Supreme Chancellor. Even now, our quantum fold generators are preparing to implement containment protocols. Your empire ends today. The only question is whether it ends with your civilization intact on your homeworld, or with your species scattered across stars that will no longer acknowledge your existence." "You would erase us entirely?" Naira whispered. "No. We would remove your ability to harm others. There's a difference." Winter's voice was firm but not unkind. "The technology you've seen demonstrated today represents a fraction of our capabilities. We could have destroyed your empire centuries ago. Instead, we watched and waited, hoping you would outgrow your need to dominate others." The tactical display updated, showing more human ships appearing in impossible configurations. They weren't weapons of war, Naira realized. They were instruments of surgery, precisely arranged to excise a cancer from the galaxy. "You have 1 hour remaining," Winter announced. "The quantum fold generators are in position. When they activate, they will either establish a containment field around your homeworld, allowing your civilization to continue in isolation, or they will remove your empire's ability to exist in normal spacetime. The choice is yours." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in heavy silence. Around them, the greatest achievements of Stellarian civilization suddenly seemed like children's toys, pretending to be real technology. "The evacuation ships are ready," Defense Minister Koth reported quietly. "We can begin moving our population back to the homeworld immediately." Naira looked around the chamber, at the faces of those who had helped build and maintain their empire. She saw fear there, yes, but also something else, recognition. Recognition that everything they had believed about their place in the universe had been wrong. "Send the order," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "All forces are to return to Luminera. The Empire ends today." As the council chamber erupted into activity, Ambassador Verix stepped closer to Naira's position. "There will be those who resist," he said quietly. "Those who cannot accept this new reality." Naira watched the tactical display, where human ships continued their perfect dance around Stellarian space. "They will learn," she replied. "As we have learned. The hard way, if necessary." The evacuation began in earnest, an empire dying not through violence or conquest, but through the simple recognition that it had never been as mighty as it had believed. Above them, the artificial stars of the Centaurus array continued their cold illumination, indifferent to the Empire's fall. Dawn of Understanding. 1 year after the fall of the Stellarian Empire, Ambassador Verix stood before a different council chamber. Gone were the crystalline spires and artificial stars of the Imperial Palace. Instead, he faced the newly formed Assembly of Restoration on their ancestral homeworld, Luminera. The chamber was simpler, but there was a dignity in its restraint that the old empire's gaudy displays had never achieved. "The last colonial evacuation ships have arrived," he reported to the assembled representatives. "All surviving Stellarian populations are now contained within the quantum barrier surrounding our system." Supreme Chancellor Naira, now serving as first speaker of the assembly, nodded gravely. The past year had aged her visibly, her once brilliant scales now bearing a more muted sheen. "And the barrier itself?" "Stable," Verix replied. "The humans maintain it with a precision that our scientists still cannot comprehend. We can see out, communicate to a degree, but we cannot extend our influence beyond our home system. We are, as they intended, contained." The assembly chamber held none of the panic that had characterized those final days of the Empire. In its place was something far more valuable: understanding. "Director Winter's monthly communication is due," announced Coordinator Vex, who had become a bridge between his people and humanity. The young Stellarian's presence was a constant reminder of how far they had fallen, and how far they had yet to grow. The holographic display activated, showing Winter's familiar figure. She looked exactly as she had a year ago, when she had orchestrated the end of an empire. "Greetings, Assembly of Restoration. I trust the transition continues to progress." "It does," Naira replied, her voice carrying a humility that would have been unthinkable in the days of the Empire. "Though many still struggle to accept our new reality." "That is to be expected," Winter said. "Cultural change is never easy, especially when it requires acknowledging uncomfortable truths about oneself." The display shifted, showing images of the former Stellarian colonies. Where once their cities had dominated alien worlds, now other species were reclaiming their own paths of development. The humans had not simply contained the Stellarians, they had begun helping the former subject species rebuild, but on their own terms. "We've been reviewing the historical archives," Vex reported. "Learning about our own past, before the Empire. We were different then. Curious, yes. Ambitious, certainly. But not what we became." Winter nodded. "That is why we chose containment over extinction. Your species has the capacity for growth, for change. You simply lost your way." "And the children?" Naira asked, the question that had haunted her for the past year. "Those we..." She struggled to say the words, "those we took." "They are healing," Winter replied. "Both yours and ours. The neural conditioning is being reversed. They will have scars, but they will recover. In time, some may even choose to help guide your society's restoration." The assembly chamber was quiet as the implications of that statement sank in. The very children they had tried to remake might someday help remake them instead, not through force or conditioning, but through understanding and choice. "There are still those who call for resistance," Verix admitted. who believe we should find a way to break the containment barrier, to restore the Empire. Yes, Winter said, there always will be. But they will fail. Not because we will stop them, but because enough of your people now understand why they should not succeed. The display shifted again, showing the quantum barrier that surrounded the Luminara system. To human sensors, it was a masterpiece of mathematical precision, each quantum fold generator working in perfect harmony to maintain a bubble of contained spacetime. To Stellarian eyes, it was simply an iridescent shimmer in the void, a constant reminder of their new place in the universe. You could have destroyed us, Naira said quietly. When you discovered what we were doing to the children, you could have eliminated our entire species. Why didn't you? Because that would have made us what you were, Winter replied. We did not contain you out of revenge, or even out of justice. We contained you because you proved you could not be trusted with power over others. But that does not mean you cannot learn to be trusted again. The assembly chamber fell silent, contemplating those words. Outside, the three sons of Luminara cast their light across a civilization learning to see itself clearly for the first time in centuries. Before I end this transmission, Winter said, I have a question for the assembly. What have you learned, in this past year of containment? Naira looked around the chamber, at the faces of her fellow Stellarians. In them, she saw not the arrogant certainty of the Empire, but something far more valuable, doubt. Question. Reflection. We have learned, she replied carefully, that true advancement lies not in dominating others, but in mastering ourselves. We have learned that power without wisdom is more dangerous to those who wield it than to those it is wielded against. And most importantly, she looked directly at Winter, we have learned that the universe is far larger, far stranger, and far more worthy of respect than we ever imagined. Winter smiled, and for the first time, there was genuine warmth in her expression. Then perhaps, first speaker, your containment will not need to be permanent after all. The transmission ended, leaving the assembly to contemplate that possibility. Outside their chamber, beyond the quantum barrier that marked the boundaries of their new existence, the galaxy continued its eternal dance. But within those boundaries, something new was taking root, understanding. It was, Verix reflected, watching the light of three suns play across the chamber, a beginning. Not the beginning they would have chosen, but perhaps the one they had needed all along.